Hi everyone.
Now you're live. Yeah.
It is me. I'm back again.
Hold
Happy
on.
Sunday, everybody. I hope that we're all holding tight and well. I'm happy to be hosting with the Let's start again. I am taking over the Katona Museum's Instagram today, and this is my live. So happy to be here. For those of you who are not from New York or not familiar, the Katona Museum is a beautiful, gorgeous museum in Westchester County. I have my very first solo show, which is actually at the museum right now. And unfortunately, it's been closed because of the quarantines. Quarantines. I don't know if that's plural or not. I've heard a lot of states, a lot of you out here in the world, your states are relaxing some of the guidelines, but needless to say, New York is still on lockdown. I have I should know the exact number, but I would say 25 pieces of artwork that are currently hanging at the museum. My artwork is quilted fabric portraiture, and I can scoot over a little bit just so you can see what I do, but this is a piece that I've been working on for a while. And then I also have a little guy over here. I'm gonna pull this a little so you can see him.
Just tell me which direction.
Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. And that's my daughter who you hear in the background. My daughter Tammy is going to be reading comments and everything because, trying to read that screen and talk to you all at the same time, it's not so easy. But this is my latest little man. I call him the boss because he just has this little bossy attitude. I'm doing a family of 8, actually. They're going to represent the African American family who came up from the South during the Great Migration, which would have been like 1930 to I think the Great Migration technically ended around 1960, believe it or not, and that's a debated thing. So all the historians, please don't come for me. I know it could have been earlier, or in some things could have been later, but I'm gonna stick with those 30 years for now. And I'm doing a family who traveled up from Florida and was moving through New Jersey and I think on to Chicago in the 1940s. So that's where the boss, he's going to be a part of that. And little sis here, she also is going to be in the family. And I've worked on the mother already. I've got the father. I've got 2 grandparents and 2 more siblings to work on. I also want, before I forget, this lovely catalog put out by the Katona Museum. It's gorgeous. It is available on their website now. I have to get the plugs in early because sometimes I forget to do those things like that, the housekeeping things. And almost every piece, I can move it a little closer so you can see. The entire exhibit is in this catalog along with full essays. The curator was Michelle Weegee, who did an absolutely fantastic job. She also writing in this catalog is Erica Warren and Michael Gitlitz. Please forgive me, Michael. I don't think I've ever said your last name out loud, who is the director at the Katona Museum. And Erica Warren is a curator at the Art Institute of Chicago. So this exhibit, when it finally does open, and hopefully you all can join me there, we'll travel on to the Art Institute of Chicago, and I think that's scheduled for November now, but we will see. We will see. I want to give a special shout out to the AKAs, of which my daughter is a soror, and I want to give a special shout out. What group is it?
Yeah, so it is the Pi Theta Omega chapter in Morristown, New Jersey, in the AKA Gems. So we have a shout out for student Gabriella Cameron and student Simone Winkler.
Hi, Gabriella. Hi, Simone. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you so much, Reba. You're fantastic. Um, I guess she's your senior soror. I don't want to use incorrect language. I know how y'all get, but thank you all so much for joining me. It's
Just
really
sort of,
special to have the AKAs in on this conversation. And I guess
yeah, they have a couple questions. Yeah,
yes.
so they ask, so it looks like Gabriella Cameron asks, how long did it take you for you to create the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake?
That piece that Gabriella is referring to is of Frederick Douglass, and I'll make sure that I post that after this if you're not familiar with it. But I did about a 9-foot high life-size image of Frederick Douglass as a young man in his 30s. And that piece took a while because I really had to, first I had to buy a book that some one of my Instagram friends recommended called Picturing Frederick Douglass, which had about 35 to 40 images of Frederick Douglass throughout his life. And I couldn't find any full figure, like standing up photographs of Frederick Douglass as a young man. So I had to use 2-seated photographs of him and then look at his frame and size. I also had to research, like, how tall was Frederick Douglass? How much did he weigh? Like, trying to find information on somebody who was 30 years old in 1840. You know, that's prior to when slavery ended. So that particular piece took a lot of research. So if I added that all into it, I would say it probably took me about a month to do that piece, when if I hadn't had to do all that prior research and sketching I had to sketch his body based on human proportions. People who draw, we know that, like, the human head, we measure height by how many heads tall somebody is. So an average person, if you measured my head and then you went down, well, I'm only 5'4", which is not short. I guess that's average. That's probably about like 6.5 of my head's high. Where I read Frederick Douglass may have been 5'11", so I had to figure out how many heads high was Frederick Douglass at 5'11". What would his leg length have been like? What would his foot length have been like? And all that is just me guesstimating because I don't have an actual photo of that. So the research took about probably 2 weeks in itself. You know, it was longer than a month because it took me 2 weeks to piece everything together. And then I'd say the sewing probably took me 1 week. So all in all, I would say about 6 weeks for that, for the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake, which was a quote from one of Frederick Douglass's speeches that he gave on the 4th of July. And basically the speech was, what is the 4th of July to a Negro? What was it to us as African Americans who weren't yet free? So if the country is celebrating its centennial and, you know, the home of the free and the brave, but you've got this huge swath of people who live here, who are born here, who raised here, who toil here for no pay, but then to say that you're not even a citizen of this country, it's really something that people don't realize. But African Americans were not considered citizens of this country. I don't have the date on when that happened, and I would assume it happened sometime during and right after Reconstruction, or during Reconstruction, right after the Civil War. But during the Civil War and during the period of slavery, all these black people were not considered citizens. And there was another question, right, Tammy?
Yeah.
AKA?
How do you work through a creative block? This is from Simone Winkler.
Oh, that's a good question, Simone. Creative blocks? It's interesting, but lately I've been sewing masks to try to, like, just get my mind on something else. Sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I watch things. The good thing about this quarantine is that my daughters are here with me, so they're definitely, like, they keep me laughing, they keep me feeling lighthearted. And actually sometimes a snack can help with the creative block. And I apologize for the noise, but I had the window open because it's kind of warm today. Thank God the sun is starting to come out. So
And then, how do you select your colors and materials? Do you see fabric first, or do you see the vision and then the fabric?
You got it exactly right. It's the vision and then the fabric. I'll research images online. I will spend weeks just collecting images. I have so many images saved on my phone that I'll never really have time to get done. I have images from I have images that have been on my phone for years, in fact, and I'll be looking at these things, and it's sort of like a meditation. I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, I'm really feeling this. This is speaking to me, and I really want to do something with this. And then I'll work on a sketch of that image. And as I'm sketching and looking at the image, I'm starting to get a feeling for it. What colors do I want to use? I'm looking at mostly black and white photos, actually all black and white photos, and I'm thinking, what color do I feel emanating from this person? And when I say feel like that, I'm talking about the color theory and color as a means of communicating emotion. So colors that are warm, like red and yellow and orange, are considered the sun colors, warmth, fire. So that can be passion, that can be happiness, that can be excitement. Cool colors like blue, purple, green. Well, green is neutral, so I'll say blue, purple, aqua are more like, think of cool water and chill, yeah, relaxation. So that can go with a different kind of mood. If you use a very dark color scheme, I can use red and orange, but if I'm using darker versions of that, it's going to look a lot more somber than something when I'm using like my favorites, which are like bright and fluorescent colors. If you look at, well, how about let's look at this little boy right here, the boss. So on one side of his face, I'll use this just to cover it, but on one side of his face are mostly all cool colors. So this is one mood for him. This little boy, he's like the boss of his family, and one day he will, in my estimate, in my imagination, he is going to be the boss of the family. He's going to take care of grandma and grandpa, of his sisters even. And so on that one side is like more serious, he's a little man. And then on the other side, it's still deep and somber colors, but they're getting more passionate and more warm. And this is like, he is still youthful. Still has this vitality and this spark, and he's got many, many more years to go. And I like to play with the idea of warm and cool. And because he's not sewn yet, he's like a little paper doll. But you can see like his arm, one side is the warm side and the other side is the cool side. But in contrast, when you look at his big sister, she's mostly warm shades. And look at the difference in their faces. You know, they're in the same family, and they're being raised by the same parents, but they're raised at different times. You know, she's older than he is. And all of us are individuals. The way we experience the world is different. So the way the boss, the way he experiences the world and is synthesizing this move, because remember, this family is leaving their home in Florida that they've known and loved and grown up. The children have grown up there in the deep south, and they're on their way to the north, where it's cold. They're not really going to know anybody. They're probably going to go where they do have some relatives, but they're processing this thing in a different way. Maybe little sis, this is my nickname for her, but maybe little sis is feeling more hopeful and more optimistic. Or maybe our little boss here, maybe he's feeling more of a burden on him. Or maybe he's feeling not quite as optimistic as her. But I really like to show that we are not all the same. You know, not even in the same family.
Somebody asks, what about when your creative juices are flowing on overload? How do you prioritize what you work on first?
That's a really good question, because I think that happens to be a lot. How do I prioritize? It's rough, Because right now I'm working on this one, but I have these images on my phone that are killing me. I want to get them out so badly. So the only thing that I can do is just to put fire on my feet to get me to work through this and finish what I'm doing. But it's rarely, never would I stop a piece and like just break off and do something else, because I guess that's another part of my personality too. It's like I started this family, I owe it to them. I've got to put that effort and get them done right. But how do I slow that's a difficult thing to do. I think I'm still grappling with it now, just because, like I said, all the images that I have. I mean, it's like trying to count how many images there are on the internet. Like, I wouldn't say it's an infinite number of things I can do, but probably. Some people ask me, would I ever do like contemporary images? Right now, I'm interested in the past and doing things that are in black and white, but I see compelling images of people who are alive now all the time. And I could just do a whole, I thought about like, I could do a whole series of just like the 70s, you know, or I could do like the 1980s, or I could do what is happening right now, like quarantine time. This is a time that none of us will ever forget. Um, so yeah, that's something. Trying to. I hope I live long enough to make all the images that I feel compelled to make.
Somebody asks, with the great demand for your artwork, do you feel pressured on production?
I used to. I felt more pressure, I would say, a couple years ago when I was just transitioning. Excuse me. I was a high school art teacher for 13 years. So shout out to all my former students and coworkers who are out there. Shout out to all the educators everywhere, because you all fight the good fight. And you're still fighting the fight. I can't even. Online instruction of a studio art class, like, wow. What was the question, Demi?
Oh yeah, do you feel pressured on production?
Oh, okay. So I did at first. When I first transitioned, because I was like, I got this deadline, I gotta bang, bang, bang. But now I kind of can guess how much more time I'm gonna need. And thank God I'm working with a wonderful gallery, the Claire Oliver Gallery from Harlem. They're based in Harlem, New York. And Claire is an excellent person to work with, but she's learning me and I'm learning her, and like, how many pieces can I reasonably make that I can really put my best effort into. And because I want every piece to be my best, I don't put more on my plate than I can finish, you know. And as far as the demand, people want the best, you know. People who are willing to spend a lot of money on artwork, they want the best artwork that they can get. They don't want a piece that I just rushed out, and so you have one piece that, you know, is really compelling and you can feel like the soul and the spirit, and then you have a piece that's sort of like empty. Like, I would never want to do that to anyone, nor to myself, because it's so unsatisfying. Um, if you look on the Katona Museum story today, I posted an image of two faces. And so there are two women. One woman's face I did earlier, and it just was not working. And I spent at least 4 days or 5 days on the face alone. And I just had to scrap it and start from scratch. And then you'll see in the image, side by side, the one that I went with is just much stronger, much more compelling. I don't even think I have to tell you all, if you look at it, which is the one that I went with, because it's almost like one looks like a mannequin and one looks like a human being. So I try not to let demands of people waiting for work get to me, because I know everybody is waiting for something that is the best.
So somebody asks if where they can get the magazine from or catalog, and if they're still going to be able to see your portraits at the Katona Museum.
Well, I hope so. The Katona Museum has extended my show, thank God. Thank you, Katona. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to the staff at the museum. But they've extended my show until October 4th. So, right? Let's just hope that lockdowns will be open and that we can go to them. I mean, I can't even guess what is coming up. Me myself, I actually have hypertension, and it's not based on my weight or my diet or anything. It's genetic. I got it when I was 20 years old, so I'm one of those people who are more high risk. So I'm not, I'm not one of those people who's going to storm any capital. Who's like, some people gotta go. Like, I'd actually like to remain. So we'll just see what happens. I don't know, but I do know that the museum has committed to making sure that I do have a reception, and the catalog is available at the Katona Museum's website. So I'll post that on my page as well, just for anybody who didn't get a chance to see the link. But yeah, these are still available, and you get. Oh, I should have brought them, but they also, when you get this, you also get 4 postcards. So.
Chris Tubatten says your use of fabric is amazing. Where do you get most of your fabric?
I get my fabric, now it's online, but I like to go to local fabric shops, support the mom and pop businesses. There have been so many fabric shops that have closed around me alone, but we have a fabric shop here, Central Fabrics, and it's right in East Orange, New Jersey, and they have a good selection of African print fabrics. Thank goodness I live right next to New York. The gallery I work out of, Claire Oliver's in Harlem, but we live about, I'd say, 40 minutes from Harlem. And Harlem has a section called Little Senegal. And in Little Senegal, they have a bunch of African fabric stores. And then also I also go to the Garment District in Manhattan itself, where they have just fabric store after fabric store after fabric store. So basically, you have access to everything. But also, if you don't, you can always go to Etsy. They have tons of African fabric on there.
Diane9679 says, what impact do you think COVID will have on art sales? So many shows have been canceled.
Yes. I guess that's like trying to predict, are we in a recession? You bankers and financiers, like my daughter here behind the scene, she actually works for Goldman Sachs, so she's more in the know of that. But I do know that it's having a big impact on museums. Some museums are closing, like knock on wood that no museums that I know or hear of are closing, but some are canceling exhibits. Thank God I haven't had anybody back out on a sale for me yet, and so hopefully that won't happen. But when people have to tighten those purse strings, like, if it's... And then people who are buying art, a lot of times this is their discretionary income. Like, this is money that was not going to be a meal, maybe instead of a trip to Singapore or something like that, maybe they'll buy artwork. Yeah, I really don't know. So far, it hasn't affected my sales in that way, because I had my exhibit on February 29th at Claire Oliver, and that was right before the virus hit. And my show sold out the day before my exhibit opened, so by February 28th, I was good to go. But I haven't had any exhibits since then, because they were museum shows. And museum exhibits, the artwork is not for sale. All of the pieces in this exhibit, every piece has been sold already, maybe last year, the year before, or maybe even 6 months ago. And the museum borrows these pieces from the collectors. So that is not, necessarily like revenue bringing in, but having an exhibit in a museum is a great honor for any artist. That's something that you dream about, and that's something that makes you into, the official, like, the success.
Foe of the Status Quo asks, how is your art displayed at the exhibit, and how are these pieces best maintained?
At the exhibit, the pieces are hung on dowels, so they kind of appear like this one. Like, you can't really see the top of this, but it appears like that it's just floating. But behind every piece that I make, there's a sleeve that is stitched, and then you just slip a dowel in there and hang it right up on the wall. Um, and as far as maintaining quilts, every type of fabric has a lifespan, or I guess it's depending on the sun and dust and things like that. But quilts are not meant to be hung up all the time. I have pieces that are hanging in my house, but I shift them a lot because I have different things that I want to like show off, and I only have but so many wall spaces. But I would say longer than a year is probably too long. Maybe like 6 months, hang a piece up, and then maybe let it rest for a while, and then you can hang it up again. But my quilts are made from clothing, like not clothing, but the fabric that we make from clothing or out of clothing. So like this is like, African print fabric. These fabrics are meant to be washed and washed and washed and dried and worn again. And my pieces, I'm not necessarily going to wash them, nor am I going to put them in the dryer. But I have fabric left over from my grandmother and my mother. Like this is some of my mother's kente from the 1980s. And I think it looks a little bit dimmer than when it was brand new. But not bad. Not bad. You just, you have to give your fabrics a rest. And the nice thing about quilts is that you can fold them up and put them in a lovely, like, airtight container and just let it have a rest.
Someone asks, can we purchase prints?
Yes, actually, the Claire Oliver Gallery, and I'll have to put a link for that too. She's actually selling a poster of this image. It looks exactly like this, except for without Bisa Butler portraits at the top, and it is much bigger. It's like for 6 times the size. It's like 20 by 24. I think it's 20 by 24. It's a poster. It's $35, and if you email the gallery and pay for the poster, then they just mail it out to you. And so unfortunately this is the only one we have right now. We were actually working on a print of my Frederick Douglass image, which is, well, it was going to be not 9 feet tall. I can't remember what size we were working with, maybe 2 feet. And we had to stop because of quarantines and the print shop shut down. I mean, it was pretty dramatic because we were actually looking at proofs, and then all that shut down. But there will be more prints available than just this image in the future.
Debbie Mullen asks, do you work with assistants?
I do, actually. I had one assistant, Dahomey Warrior, who is a fantastic artist. It's kind of hard to define Bumi's work, but I would say she makes prints and sculptures out of African American hair. And so her Instagram is Adabooms. It's ADABOOMS if you want to look her up. And she actually is not my assistant anymore. She's too fabulous. She now works with Claire Oliver and is an exhibiting artist all her own, and is absolutely incredible. And then I have another assistant who works with me still, Ellen Weisbord, who's also an amazing artist. She's another fiber artist. What is Ellen working on now? She's mostly a weaver, but she's more than that. She was an art teacher for more than 27 years at Columbia High School in Maplewood. She's working on these amazing like woven baskets. So she's really ubiquitous, and she's excellent. Although she hasn't been assisting me now because it's quarantine time, so I'm on my own. But yeah. I have had assistance.
The Artful Lady asks, would you ever go back to teaching again, and if so, what age group?
Probably not. Folks have asked me that before. I think 13 years is enough, really. And all the moms out there, we all know that it's longer than that. Because I'm still close with my students. I still talk with them. Some of them still come by. We still go to art exhibits together. I think like now is my time, So I was a teacher for 13 years, and I've been an independent artist now for only 3. So I got some years to go. I would say I give myself a nice, good. I mean, you know, how as women, how much do we really owe ourselves? Really, what, 20 years? Is that good? I don't know, but I just can't see it. But I'll never say never. Never say never. But I can't see it now.
Lacey Hicks, Daryl Jean asks, does Claire Oliver Gallery have a catalog of your quilts?
Does Claire have a catalog? No. I think most of the images of my work that I've sold or exhibited with Claire are on her website, which is, it's really easy. It's claireoliver.com. Um, but the Art Institute of Chicago is also putting out a catalog. When this exhibit travels from Katona to the Art Institute of Chicago, they're actually putting out a whole nother catalog, and that'll have even more images. And they are also putting together, they're going to have a poster for sale, they're going to have postcards for sale, and yeah, and actually I think that catalog is available for pre-sale already on, my friends found it on barnesandnoble.com, they found it on amazon.com, and that catalog is being put out by Yale University Press, and I thought I saw something online like Yale University Press had also had like some pre-order stuff. So yeah, I think that's a good start to have these two catalogs sort of out there and in the world. And for those people who don't know, a catalog is it's a book. It's just a book of art that's exhibiting at a museum.
Claudia Keg asks, do you ever hand sew in your work?
Not really. Not really. I've always machine sewed. It already takes me so long. I can spend, like on a one figure, if I were to sew the boss, finish him all up and sew him, I've already put in about 200 hours. So for me to hand sew, that would just be like, no. It would be exponentially longer. Although I do admire hand sewing, and I do know that that is the real way. You know, that was the first way that the quilters got their works done. And people do applique. Like my ancestors are from West Africa. My father's from Ghana, but my ancestry, like even before my father's people were in Ghana, they were in another place called Benin now, which was Dahomey back in ancient times, and they did a type of applique work that was done by hand as well. So I have great admiration for that type of work, but it's just the mode and the speed is not for me.
Someone asks, why isn't your wonderful work displayed in the North Museum?
Oh, well, the North Museum, well, we're working on a special project. I wish I could announce it now, but I cannot. But the North Museum has definitely showed me a lot of love. It's just not out in the open right now, but there are big things coming. I'm very, very excited about that.
Jay Dura asks, how do you know when to increase your prices?
When to increase? That's the gallery. Actually, it's what the gallery says. Your prices are increasing. This has been a real whirlwind, though. I would say in this past 3 years, it's gone from like, I guess they say ashy to classy. It's gone fast. That part was not me. I think to work with, if you're an independent artist, you got to pay attention to your market, and you got to bet on yourself, and sort of get a feel for what the artwork is going for in the realm that you want to be seen at, or where you're exhibiting. Let's say if you're independent, let's say you exhibit at an art fair in your city, right? I don't know, just random city art fair. You got to see what is the artwork going for in that fair, because you don't want to be the one person in that fair whose stuff is like $5 and everybody else is getting thousands. And also, you don't want to be the person whose work is going for you don't want to put 1,000 on yours and everybody else's is $5, right? That's not the right market. So you got to be smart about figuring out what is the art market that you're in and what is the going price, and then figuring out how much work you put into that piece and how much effort you put into that piece. So it's a delicate thing, and I'm really lucky that I don't have to do that type of analysis. But I would say that that's definitely somebody's job, you know, it's not haphazard. And if I wasn't working with a gallery, I would have like my daughters and my husband's be doing that research for me, you know, read up on it. What is the art market? What is the going price? What about this? What about fabric versus sculpture versus print versus quilt? Like, what is it for me? And then what do I want to get to and how do I get there?
Lynn Appel asks, would you ever consider making smaller pieces that might be more affordable than your large quilts? Maybe portraits?
It's interesting because all the 13 years that I was teaching, I was selling my own artwork independently and my prices were low. I mean low, like sometimes I would just give stuff away. Some things would be like $50. I think then it was like $300. Then I thought like $500 was like a whole lot. So for years and years and years and very little movement on that. It wasn't like it was like it was sort of like a long plateau for a decade long. I would say the affordable pieces that I do now may be affordable for some people, but it's not going to be necessarily affordable for everyone. I would think maybe more prints would be affordable for everyone. And after my exhibits open, when they finally open, that would be like another conversation to figure out how we're going to do this and what we should do next. I think that the having posters, high-end prints, and having small things like postcards will make it so that everybody can have a piece. Oh, and let me not forget about the catalogs themselves, so that like you have a catalog filled with everything. I've talked to some people about fashion collaborations. I had some really interesting meetings with some high-powered and very well-known fashion people who shall remain nameless right now about doing like clothing lines, and so everything's on the table. Basically, I'm not gonna say no to anything really. It's just like I might say no to people like no for right now, but that doesn't mean no forever.
Malka X asks, what advice do you have for young aspiring artists?
Young aspiring artists, work hard, learn your craft. Don't be afraid to take extra classes. Have your work be critiqued by people who you trust. You know, you don't want to work in a vacuum, which can happen. You know, just working on your own and nobody's looking at your work and telling you like you're not growing. You know, you're here working, you made 100 of the same thing. You need that devil's advocate. For me, my older brother was that person who unfortunately he's passed away now, but my older brother Zachary, he knew that I was making quilts. This is like 2003. 2003. So Zachary saw me one day making quilts. I had made one of like my grandfather, and he came in, and anybody who remembers Zachary, he was like really loud, braggadocious, typical older brother. Like he was also a hustler, could sell anything, and he was a vendor. And he was a veteran too, so he could vend. He had a vendor's license in New York City. He'd be down at World Trade Center, and the next day he might be by Coney Island. He'd be selling like knockoff Gucci sunglasses, perfume, like Issey Miyake, like just anything. He was a hustler. So he took one of my pieces and he was like, I'm gonna take this piece downtown and I'm gonna sell it. I'm gonna get you $100 for this piece. And I was like, Zachary, I don't want my piece downtown. I don't want it for $100 like on a corner. I want to have an art exhibit in a gallery. And Zachary was like, well, you're not. I saw you. That was rolled up under your bed. So me and Zachary got into a blowout fight because he was almost walking out the door with the quilt. And I had to I needed him to get me to have my first art exhibit. And it wasn't like I went far. I asked my father, who was Big Zach, another Zachary, who was the president at Essex County College. I asked him, can I have an art exhibit at the art gallery at the college? And It's not like he was gonna say no. So I don't want to act like it's super easy to any new artists out there. But I did have my first art exhibit at the gallery, and then that like broke me out of the shell. And then after that, I said yes to everything. I had art exhibits on front lawns at my friend's house in Martha's Vineyard. You remember that, Timmy? I've had art exhibits in church corridors. I've had art exhibits in people's living rooms. Just like whatever. I said yes, 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 yes. And in the meantime, I'm meeting people, I'm networking, and people are critiquing my work. Sometimes they look at it right on the wall and shake their heads like, this ain't gonna get it. But you know, you have to have that. So young artists out there, work hard. Don't be afraid to take courses like to improve your skills. Like if you're out here, you're doing something, you see somebody's like drawing skill or painting skill or stitching skills way better than yours, you can ask them where they learned that or research it on your own, but don't let that slip. And don't be afraid to show off your artwork. I know we want to like huddle and be in our sequestered space and not let people see what we're doing because it's very vulnerable. And it's hard to just put your stuff, something you've been working on for days and days, it's hard to put it out there and have somebody else look at it and say it sucks or whatever. So don't show it to people who say it sucks, first of all, but people who give you constructive criticism. That's what you need.
Ananse Creations asks, have you considered or imagined your work shared in other spaces outside of museums that will accommodate the new normal?
I don't even know where that would be. Outside. Well, I've been, for the past 3 years, Claire Oliver Gallery. So the Claire Oliver, that's like my gallery home, right? She's the one who represents me. So I would have my exhibits at her space. But her space was under renovation for the past 3 years. So we've been a gallery on the move. Like we exhibited in London, we exhibited in Miami during Art Basel. I did Expo Chicago 2 years in a row. And then 21C Art Museum had bought a piece of mine, so I was able to exhibit with them. So for the past 3 years, we've been like a traveling art gallery in a way, and that's really been great because I've been able to interact and meet so many different people instead of just being in the gallery in Harlem. But now, this new thing that we're going to emerge into when the quarantines are over, I have no idea what that would even be. But I wouldn't say no to it, unless it's like virtual spaces. But I'm signed to work with the Claire Oliver Gallery, so that's like my contract. I work with them. If I had like a workspace, if I went to work, not saying I don't go to work, but I work here at home. But the exhibit is at the gallery. But because the gallery was closed for renovations, all of our exhibits were at art fairs like around the world, around the country. So now that the gallery is open in New York, we're just like so happy about that. I had that one exhibit on February 29th, and then the world ended. So I'm really looking forward to exhibiting at the gallery, quite frankly. And I have museum shows, right? I keep talking about them, but they haven't opened to the public. Nothing has opened. So I just want that to happen. But I'm open. I'm definitely open.
Vaccine asks, how do you feel race and gender have impacted your rise within the art world?
Have impacted what?
Your rise within the art world.
It's interesting because race now, or racism, can be very invisible now, and it can be insidious. Some can be really out in the open, and gender discrimination as well. Like, I haven't had anybody say, you know, we're not going to exhibit your artwork because you're black or because you're a woman. But we do know things happen, like people look at a resume and they see the name Bisa, and you know what I'm saying? It doesn't sound like Betty. So somebody might right off the bat be like, I don't even want to look at her stuff because I don't want to look at somebody whose name is Bisa. So I think that it's possible and likely that I have been excluded from things and be even unaware that it happened. But I mean, for my experience has been very positive in the art world in itself. The gallerist who I work with is a woman, first of all, so we get along very well. Um, when I first started out, I used to do art fairs, and there was a big art fair in Philadelphia called the Black Art Fair. So mostly every artist there was black or sold black art if they weren't black themselves. And in the booth, you would set up your booth. You'd have like a 10 by 10 foot by 10 foot booth, and you set it up and you'd be open for 3 days. And I my husband used to be with me, but he was working and my children were small, so he would send one of his friends. My husband's from Philly. His friends and his friend Mark would help me out a lot. And it was like, at that time, I was in my late 20s. I needed to have him there because men or women would come into the booth and maybe they just wanted to hit on me, or maybe they just wanted to pretend to buy art, but they really just were trying to see like what they could finagle. And so it's a shame, but having a guy there cut down on that type of BS. So if they came in the booth, they see Mark there, they didn't know who he was to me. It wasn't like I was like, oh, this is my husband's friend. It was just me, and then there's this man. When they came in the booth, they came correct. Like they were coming to look at the art or talk at the art. But when I was standing by myself, maybe half of the people who came in, mostly men, and that's no slander on men itself, but half of them were coming in just to like flirt or whatever, and that's not what I was interested in. So I would say that got to be annoying in the early days. And then now, it's not that I'm doing it on purpose, but I travel a lot with my husband. He's my partner in life. So when people interact with me, they usually are seeing Bisa, and then there's this guy, like the man behind the woman, he's there. So I think that his presence cuts down on a lot of things. If I was moving through this world on my own as a single woman, and there was no John Butler there behind me, I think it would be different, and that's a fact.
Lavita DeVita asks, how do your daughters influence your work?
My daughters they've always been my inspiration. I mean, my oldest daughter, who just read the question, I wouldn't even be a quilter if I hadn't have had her. I was a painting major at Howard University, a historically black college in Washington, D.C., HU, the real HU, hip tonight's don't be mad. And painting, as you know, oil paint was like the traditional thing that you use in a fine arts class. In the 70s, then acrylic paints, which are like hard, they're bright and they're smooth, but they dry into like a hard oil-like sheen. Those were introduced. But the difference is, you're like, okay, oil is rich and creamy and vibrant, but it doesn't dry for like 2 weeks to like a month, or sometimes even more than a month. So it smells like oil, like car oil. And then you clean your brushes with turpentine. So these are really strong odors. I could not stand that scent when I was pregnant. And I could have just switched over to acrylic. But acrylic paint is like nail polish, right? It's acrylic. It dries really fast. So you're painting something, literally 5 minutes into it, what you have painted is dry. So you can't blend or mix that at all. So you have to like paint really fast. And whereas oil paint, those are like when you look at the Mona Lisa and things like that, why it's so smooth, because artists can just keep going over that. You could get up the next morning and do more blending and that thing is still smooth. Although I'm not even sure if the Mona Lisa is oil paint, okay? But I'm just saying that oil you can work with for months, acrylic fast. They were all toxic. I couldn't stand the smell, and then I started quilting. I started just like gluing bits of fabric on a canvas from the advice of one of my professors. And if it wasn't for Temi, I wouldn't have been doing that at all. So really, being a young mom, that was the catalyst to my entire career. I know people when you get pregnant young, people are like, oh my God, you know, your life is over. What you're gonna do? It's over for you. But you've got to. I believe in fate. I'm not here to, you know, lecture anybody, but you do have to put faith ahead of what your mind is saying logically sometimes, and saying like, this is a good thing, and I don't know what's going to come from this, but I'm going to let life happen to me, and let blessings come to me. And my daughter Temi has been nothing but a blessing since her conception, and she was that little tiny you know, fetus who was controlling me and saying like, you will not paint, you will put that down. And then when she was like a little carpet, well, she was like a little thing that crawls on the carpet, I don't know, she couldn't quite stand up yet. She was crawling, but she used to do this kind of like little crab walk thing. But she would like put every little piece of dust, those terrible lint balls that are like on hardwood floors. I would find that in her mouth, and I'd have to like pry it out. So paint was over. The smell of it, and then after she was born, there was no way I could have any paint, because she would have found that, opened that, and eaten that. So my daughters, both of them. I have another daughter, Santi, who's an artist as well, and she goes to Pratt, and she's my little critiquer now. She'll come in and be like, "Mommy, no, not working." So they're wonderful.
Amy Ronis asks, what medium do you use to build out your portraits before you sew them? And then Turan Laura asks, what's the process of creating your work? Do you create sketches or mock them up on the computer first, or is it more intuitive?
Tammy, can you pass me that sketch? You see a sketch on the table here?
This medicine?
The little girl?
Yeah.
Yeah. I keep busting out the same sketch, but I start out with a sketch, you see? This one, I actually didn't fully use it, but this was the sketch that I used to create this little girl here. And that, I wish Instagram, come on Instagram, like I would love to be able to share the screen and show you the photograph that this little girl and my little boss were inspired by, or the source photo for these images. But I start out looking at a black and white photo, I create a sketch, right, and then I start cutting my fabrics. But I don't actually use a medium. The question was, what medium did I use to build up? There's really, unless you're talking about how he's together, I'm using fabric glue to keep him together. This is not very clear here, but oh, I know, I can show you their mom. So she's a paper doll, folks, because she doesn't, you see? But she's all fabric. On the back, she's fabric. There's no paper, there's no paint. There is that clear? Can you see her?
Very.
Alright. Everything is fabric. Her eyes are silk and velvet and cotton. Her face is layers of silk. Her dress is mostly African fabrics and silk, and little bits of velvet in there. So, and then she's big. I can't fit her. But what I loved about her, I wanted her skirt to have these earths on it, because I wanted to show like the hand that rocks the cradle, you know, rules the world. But African American women, since this country was formed, have been the nurturers. They were the actual wet maids, wet nurses, wet nurse. Feeding the babies, clothing the babies, feeding the children. I just read an article in the New Yorker today about wealthy families and their nannies, and how they're being treated during quarantine. Oof, Lord, I thank God for the blessings that I have. It's hard enough raising children, raising somebody else's children, and then not being appreciated for it. And I have another piece that I can show you before we run out of time. This piece is already sewn. So I'm going to put her up close. See? This piece was made, I'm still working on her, mind you, in about 24 hours, which was insane. I was working on her right before I had to go to my first gallery show on February 29th. I did not sleep. I think I had been up for 36 hours before that happened, but I had to get her done. And she is a Dahomey Warrior. The Dahomey Amazons were actually the only true female Amazon warriors. The ones that you think about, that they talk about mythologically, they were real African women who were warrior. They were almost like priestesses. They lived in Dahomey, which is Benin now. They lived amongst themselves. They had their own special like warrior houses. They trained little warrior S's up from like 3 years old. And they were vicious now. They were not, I'm not saying like I admire them, but they were known to be bloodthirsty and they would behead people. And yes, they did help keep the English out of Dahomey, but they also attacked other African tribes. So yeah, I don't want to get into that too much because we only have 5 minutes. Any last things I should answer before we...
Yeah, you have a couple questions about people asking how to start collecting work. Do you have any advice for new collectors or those who have been attempting to acquire your work for a few years or other artworks for a few years?
New collectors, I would say definitely go to those art fairs that I was talking about, like Art in the Park, or go to Art Basel. Go to some of the smaller art fairs, or where they have new artists, where they say emerging artists, because that's where the art is going to be more affordable. Like I said, I had that gap of 13 years where I did not, my prices barely went over $1,000, like barely, for years and years and years. And some people were interested, some weren't, but there are a lot of people out there who have my work, so I'm not like saying that nobody was respecting me. People bought my work a lot, and it's in a lot of households, and that was great for me. It wasn't enough for me not to be a teacher, because remember, my prices were very low, but I always was selling. So don't sleep on those type of fairs. And for people who want to collect my artwork, you should definitely reach out to Claire Oliver. Make sure that you can try to get her on the phone or have some kind of email correspondence. And when we open back up, definitely visit the gallery, because the way she sells my artwork and I make my artwork. So the way to obtain a piece of mine now, you have to go through the gallery.
Any advice for young artists regarding gallery representation versus being independent?
I would say it's really up to you and how much freedom you like, but a good gallery can propel your career because it's their job. They're working day and night, I mean, they do sleep, but day and night, making those connections for you, finding good places for you to exhibit, finding those buyers. And to do that is one job, and then there's another job of making the art. So you want to make sure that if you want to do it yourself, maybe you're going to have to split yourself or your time half and half. And if you can work faster, then maybe that can be something you can do. But if not, talk to gallerists, talk to artists, and see who's happy. See whose career you like and who you would like to emulate yourself after. I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for spending time with me. Thank you to the Katona Museum for allowing me to take over your Instagram today. I had a great time. Thank you to the AKAs and AKA Gems and the Caps.
Yes, the youth group CAP.
Youth group CAP. Thank you so much. Thank you to my daughter Tammy. Thank you Michelle. Thank you Michael. And thank you Claire. And thank you all for joining me today. And I'll see you next time.